differences? What are the main components and characteristics that define this position? What are the biggest differences or imbalances between white and black's position? Hey everybody, I totally forgot to do an introduction for this next video, so I'm sorry, but I am National Master Jesse Cohen. This is Summer School of Chess, and this is Silman Solved Part 3. Let's get into it. And honestly, there's not a ton. So let's just take a quick look at this. So if I'm just comparing side by side, I think that white's queen is a bit more active than black's queen, so black might want to trade off that queen. Technically speaking, white's bishop is a good bishop because it is the opposite color of its center pawn, but it is not yet active. But it should activate as soon as this knight on c3 decides to move anywhere. Whereas this bishop is a bad bishop by definition. It's trapped in by its own pawn color, and it's not actually clear how that bishop's going to be made better. You know, maybe g6 and bishop g7 ideas, but that's super risky considering that the queen and bishop are aiming that direction. So it's not so clear. In terms of these knights, I would say that they're about equal. This knight is helping apply a lot of pressure to the only center pawn that white possesses, and this knight is just as good as this knight, it seems, and has the potential to maybe hop into a really powerful square on d5 someday. So I would say they're about equal. When it comes to the rooks, on one hand, I kind of like black's rooks more because they're actually on an open file and exerting pressure together with black's other pieces. Whereas these are working together to support. So, you know, I like black's rooks a bit more because they are exerting they're taking on the role of the aggressor. However, you know, white's rooks are still working together with the position to maintain this pawn on e4. And honestly, I'll tell you right now, the single biggest difference that is causing pretty much all the other differences is the pawn on e4 compared with the pawn on d6. It's really that simple. It is the single biggest difference between these two positions. If you literally remove these two pawns from the board, you'll notice that the position is basically identical. However, these two little pawns change so much. This pawn on e4 is giving white more space. Remember, space is a long-term advantage granted to you by how far your pawns are pushed. Typically, when your pawns are pushed farther, they're going to give more mobility or range or squares for your pieces to move to, and less mobility, range, and squares for your opponent to move to. And consequently, there are some strategies that go along with it. Number one, remember again, space is a long-term advantage. Jeremy Silman says so. We don't have to rush it. It's not like having a development advantage or an initiative, something that's going to fade away either in a couple of moves or instantaneously. You can take your time with this. But we are commanded by Jeremy to do three things. Number one, we want to gain more space, aka push more pawns, right? That would be increasing our advantage. We currently have a space advantage on e4 in the center. So logically speaking, if we could ever play moves like c4 or f4, or who knows, maybe even extended moves like b4 and g4, maybe these kind of ideas would be good someday, expanding our space advantage and making it even more awesome. Remembering that the side that has less space in this position, black, tends to have less room to move, less mobility. They tend to be more cramped. And because they're cramped, they typically want to trade pieces. They want to have less pieces fighting for the limited amount of squares. And so trading is simply something that black is going to be wanting to do here, but something that white is going to want to avoid. So again, white wants to gain more space, wants to avoid trading pieces, and the third thing is this. Remember, the biggest thing about a space advantage is that it makes it difficult for your opponent to move their pieces. So sometimes we're going to play a move that simply takes away another square from the opponent's piece. In this position, we are going to do something just like that. Basically, here's what we should be thinking. Okay? So, with all this being said, what do we do in this position? Dr. Tarrasch played a very simple and strong pawn h3. Now, without any explanation of what I just said, this just seems like a random whatever move. So many players would simply graze by this move and not think twice about what it actually is about. This move has two important features to it. Number one is it is taking away the square g4 from black's knight. Okay? Remember, black's trying to get more room for the pieces and is just trying to improve the pieces in general, and knights become stronger as they go up the board. It seems perfectly reasonable that black might want to do an idea like knight g4, attacking the rook, and then even go into e5. It's a nice center post, right? By playing the move h3, we are taking away mobility from the opponent's pieces. That's making our advantage even stronger, and we are potentially flirting with the idea of playing pawn g4 someday, which would gain even more space, increasing that advantage. Queen b6. Black offers a queen trade. Should we take it? I think you know what the answer is. Queen d3. We're not going to take it, but we're going to keep our queen centralized and keeping watch over the important e4 pawn. Pawn c6. The other idea behind black's move queen b6. Pawn c6 is trying to get more pawns onto light squares to help support this dark square bishop, and is trying to add more support to playing the move d5. What are we going to do about this? Knight a4. This move, at first glance, should be a move you don't like, because you are moving a knight to the edge of a chessboard, simply to make a random one-move attack on this queen. But there's more to the story than that. What we're really trying to do is gain time. Black now has to spend a move saving the queen. And after they save the queen, notice that the other thing that our knight did by moving was unblock the c-pawn. Why would we want to unblock the c-pawn? Because c4 gains more space for our position following our strategy. It also restricts control over the square d5, making it even harder for black to actually accomplish this idea. Knight to d7. It might seem illogical for black to retreat the knight, but again, black is trying to get more room for the pieces and get the knight up the board and all sorts of good stuff. From d7, this knight might go into e5. It might go into c5. There's all sorts of possibilities. Maybe this rook will switch over. It's not 100% sure. Now, I'll be honest with you. It's been a moment since I've seen this game, so I'm not 100% sure what we do here. I can tell you that the moves that white should be thinking about are a few things. Number one, we didn't really want the knight to be on a4. The point was to gain time to play c4. So bringing the knight back to c3 seems very, very logical. Play king h1 here? Okay. So again, to the untrained eye, this move might not make too much sense. But if we understand that Dr. Tarrasch, by the way, for those who don't know, he's one of the founding fathers of modern chess and one of the strongest players of all time. Like, if he was alive today, I think there was no doubt that he would have a 2700 rating plus in his prime. No doubt. He was that good. Again, white knows that we're going to start gaining space on the king side, so we're simply getting our king off to the side so that he's not going to be a casualty when that goes on. Pawn to f6. Seems a bit weird, but it seems like black understands what's going to be going on and is trying to shut down that bishop a bit. Now, again, I'm not sure. It could be knight c3 relocating the knight. It could be pawn g4. I'm going to go for knight c3. Still not knight c3. Does it want g4? No. Now I'm a bit perplexed. I think it's queen c2. This is not the best move. Queen c2 gets the queen away from a square where it can be attacked by knight c5 or knight e5. However, queen b1 was a bit more accurate, since then it would not be facing the black queen on the c-file. This doesn't seem important now, but later on it will be very significant. Yeah, it's hard to tell that though. Knight to e5. What do we do now? Probably knight back to c3, right? Knight back to f7. It really seems odd what black's doing. Why is this knight just jumping around so much? To be completely honest, I think that black understands how rough this position is and is following Steinitz's, I believe, it's either Steinitz's or Lasker's principle of defense, that in this position, black has a long-term difficulty, a long-term disadvantage of having this lack of space. It's not going anywhere soon. And so black looks like they're taking the time to kind of solidify the position. How do you solidify a position? Steinitz tells us to voluntarily reinforce the weakest points in your army. I believe it's g4 here. What's the point of this move? It's gaining more space. It's not giving our pieces any specific more room, but there's all sorts of ideas. We can't help but notice that our bishop is aiming over at the king side, and ultimately, folks, listen, ultimately, we need to have a target, okay? Steinitz tells us that when we have the better position, we must launch an attack. We have a slow but sure building advantage, this long-term space advantage. It's going to keep building up, but eventually it's going to build up to the point where we need to break through and have some sort of attack on a specific target. Now, what target should that be? Well, typically it's a pawn, and typically it's one we think we can reach well. White is starting to conceive of the idea, I believe, of playing for the move pawn to g5, when it could perhaps open up the g file and this bishop to attacking potential around black's king. Was a rook d1 first. It's to unpin the knight. This isn't about d6, it's to unpin the knight with, well, applying pressure as best as possible. Queen to b6, and now I think it's rook g3, right? No? Is it h4 now? There we go. Ugh. The timing on this can be so brutal. There's all specific reasons that I'm not going to get into because it would make the lesson take way too long, but there are specific reasons why this timing is important. But yes, I want you to just see we are working towards the eventual playing rook g3, pawn g5, and I think even knight e2 to d4 to f5 kind of ideas. Knight e5, okay, now it's definitely time to play rook g3. If there wasn't a time before, now's the time. Knight here, and now I believe here, if I'm not mistaken, it's f3. I know that this seems a bit weird and wonky, but again, this is what black's #1 target, and if we can just stop guarding it with pieces, that would be ideal. Now we don't have to worry about that anymore, and we can turn our attention. Now our knight can actually move and reroute into better squares, maybe knight e2 to d4. But keep in mind, before we play a move like knight e2, once again, this bishop wants to be unblocked. The only way to unblock it is moving this knight. This knight doesn't have anywhere good to go. Doubling the rooks. All right. Again, I want you to see what white did in this game. White hasn't done anything fast. First, white made sure that black could not mobilize pieces, starting with the black knight, by removing some squares. White then took the time as necessary to gain more space and restrict black from playing the essential freeing move, pawn to d5. Then, white continued to methodically, but slowly and surely, gain more space, and eventually it has to go somewhere. We need a breakthrough. We need a place where we are planning to trade pawns and open the floodgates, the pathways. You need an open pathway to go in there. So again, everything white's doing right now is to prepare pawn g5 and open up all this lineup to black's king. Queen to wants g5 now. We can play g5 now. And again, look at black's pieces. Look at black's pieces. Please understand, black was a top-level grandmaster. Black was not a noob. Black was not an amateur. This Schlechter was one of the greatest grandmasters of all time, some debate. Okay? And he's getting smashed in this position because of Tarrasch's understanding of how to effectively use space. Black just got squeezed like a snake squeezes its prey. Just slowly, the black pieces are suffocating, and it's just about to be over. Pawn g5 takes back. What should we do? Should we take back with the pawn? No. The whole idea is to have an open pathway towards that king. Pawn g6. We have a lot of things we can do here. Knight f5 seems the strongest. Again, the pawn can't take the knight because the rook will take the king. And I mean, just look at white's pieces, okay? Just look at them. Like, almost every single white piece is superior to black. And if you notice my last lesson, you're going to notice that this theme comes up all the time. Making sure that your pieces are superior to your opponent's pieces, okay? Is it f4 immediately? Because if he takes it, well, I could play queen c3. But if queen c3 now, then there. Okay, sure, then takes. And bishop g7, oh, then takes. And finally, Schlechter resigns. It makes sense. He's crashing through no matter what. Yeah, with taking on g6 and the pin on g7. Like, I'm pretty sure that what's going to happen after this point is another sacrifice, like rook takes here. That's a blunder. I suppose it is a blunder. Oh, because the rook. Oh, it's a rook e1. Oh, it's because the rook e1 check and rook e2, forcing it off the rook. Oh. Okay. Fine. We won't be that greedy. We'll just play h5. Inaccurate, sure, but this should just work. Like, we want to play this move d5 or f5, but f5, white just has too much control. d5, it seems like white has too much control, and yet we find a way to make this work. d5. This works just in the nick of time. Okay? Pawn takes. Pawn takes. Notice that because of the queen on c2, there will not be knight takes pawn the way that white would like to in light of queen takes free queen. So instead, white has to capture with the pawn. Why does this matter? Because black first happily exchanges off a bunch of pieces since we were so cramped, and then at the end of all this, we have queen g3. When black is suddenly attacking the two undefended h3 and e3 pawns, and suddenly this position should easily be a draw, perhaps even just better for black, because black has achieved everything they needed to. Black was able to destroy the center, black was able to free the pieces and trade off because they were cramped, and now black's winning back the material. So yeah, this was a missed opportunity. Again, no matter which side of the board we're playing on, we must first read the board, let the board tell us what's going on. Remember, an advantage is only as good as you can use it. And in today's lesson, we talked about space advantage. Again, like we did in a previous lesson. Remember, with space advantages, they are long-lasting, so you can take your time to nurture them, but you should be making them bigger and better by advancing your pawns. You should be avoiding the trade of pieces, and you should be taking away the safe squares that your opponent's pieces currently can have. So it will just continue to restrict them more and more until they cannot breathe and they collapse under the weight of their own stress and pressure. All right, I hope that you found this instructive. I will see you next time. This is National Master Jesse Cohn from Summer School of Chess. Bye for now!